Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and drop them into the Q&A and we'll answer them in the order that they are received. I have some FAQs that we can go through. But I'll go ahead and give it a second, see if we've got any other questions from you guys. Why don't you guys let me know what's the last thing that you worked on within your system? What was the last thing that you guys did? Did you work on Smarblocks? Did you set up your task templates? Were you going through and looking through your email templates? Are you guys wanting to see, a way that you can audit your system and see what needs to be fixed or what needs to be improved? Are we wanting to see ways that we can use different parts of the system to our advantage, or ways that you may have not used it before and it could help you in certain cases? Any of those kinds of questions work as well. So feel free, like I said, get those into the Q&A. I'll go ahead and go over the FAQs that we have from this week while we're waiting. Hopefully you guys add in something. So we've got one FAQ. Why is my agent unable to import a FUB contact into the intake form? When we're talking about having our agents fill out our intake form, I'm going to go ahead and go down to our gear, into our organization and users, go over to our agents, and I'm going to just go ahead and click on and impersonate one of our agents. When our agents go to fill out that intake form, that means that they're logging into their they're logging into their portal, heading down to their intake form, and then they're selecting one of the intake forms here. However, if they are trying to import from FUB, the first thing they're going to want to do is actually make sure that they have their FUB credentials added in here. So they'll need to go in and they'll need to add in their own API key for Follow-Up Boss and make sure that that's added in here before they fill out that intake form. If they do not have an API key added underneath here, when they go to fill out that intake form, and I'll go ahead and just start up my buyer side one right now. Let me go ahead and add it, pop in an address, then we'll click down to the contacts. Some safety guards and safety measures in there stopping me. But here, when we go down to our contacts and we click on add, we're not going to see that import from FUB. Why? Because technically they don't have an API set up with their account to be able to show that. So they'll want to make sure that they add that underneath their little lock icon, add new credential, add in their own API key here. Then when they go to fill out that intake form, they'll have access to that particular tool to import the buyer, buyer's agent, whoever they need to, or they could even click on add contact and import from here as well. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this form because we don't need that. Anytime you guys are testing out your intake forms or you're going to look at something, just remember, select cancel the form. That way you don't have to worry about it caching and just sitting there with an address in there or half filled out or just questions already kind of clicked on or data already filled out, but it's not the correct data. When you click on cancel form, it clears that form out so that way, if someone goes to fill it out again, specifically this person, they go to fill out that buyer site again, it's a new form. All right. Cool. Go ahead and unimpersonate my agent. All right, looks like some people were having issues with their smart block populating correctly. Smart blocks are kind of cool, but smart blocks are also super, super unique to the system that you're in, right? Depends on how you built it out and what you need it to do. I think the thing that this person was running into was when they are dealing with multiple conditions and how they were dealing with those multiple conditions. So whenever you're adding or creating your smart blocks, and you have multiple conditions. For example, like this one has multiple conditions. First, it says if earnest money amount is not blank, and then it has an or the earnest money receipt is missing on the property, or the contact role escrow officer exists on the property. So it could be any three of those conditions, and If it is any three of those conditions, this particular smart block will populate on an email. Sounds like the issue that this client may have been running into was that instead of having it as a or, they instead had it as an and. So what does an and condition look like? I'm going to go ahead and back out of this particular smart block. We'll go ahead and go to our HOA smart block. We'll scroll down to the bottom. So here's an example of a regular condition. If we wanted to add another condition that was an and, well, it needs to be, yes, there is an HOA, and because there's a due date here, I want to make sure that the due date has a value in it, right? So I'll select add condition, and here I'm going to be creating a brand new condition. So I'll say property field, I'll say HOA, I'll grab that due date, and I'll say is not blank, right? Because I need that date to be able to add that into here. I'll go ahead and say add. This is what an and condition looks like. So if you can see, it doesn't have that or, right? So it's not, is there an HOA or the due date? It's, is there an HOA equal to yes, and that HOA due date is not blank, right? So these are two separate conditions. If we wanted to create an or, how would we do that? We needed to create an or, we would click where it says field in blue text. So if we needed to say HOA due date is not blank, or the HOA due days field has a number, we can click on field. We can click on here. It'll warn you or let you know that you're doing a child conditional. You're going to select the property field that you're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and type in HOA. I'm going to grab that days field. And once again, I'm going to say, as long as it's not blank, add that particular condition. So now you can see them back to back. This top one at the very top is a regular standalone condition. The one below it has a or condition with it. So it's either that the due date is not blank or the due days is not blank. So it has to meet both of these conditions to be able to populate the smart block. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Cool. All right. Looks like, can we download multiple files at once? Yes, we can. We'll just want to navigate to our documents. We'll want to navigate to our files. Let's say we need to get these particular files here. We're going to select the boxes next to those files. We'll go down to options, and then we can select export. And what it's going to do is, depending on the file size, it will go ahead and export that as a zip file. Then you can open up that zip file, and then there you go. You have your documents. All right. Looks like we don't have any questions just yet. Like I said, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. I kind of want to learn from you guys. Like, what are you guys, what's the last thing that you've, created within your open to close account? What's the last thing that you messed around with? Was there any situations you found yourself in recently? You reached out to support and we helped you out with it, and you kind of want to see it live. Maybe you reached out and you said, oh, I was trying to, add form conditions to my intake form, but then the fields started to populate in a different order than I expected. How do I correct that? That's something that I can kind of show you guys, but tell me what you guys are looking for as far as for what we want to see within the system. We can go ahead and take a look at that. If not, I'll go ahead and choose one of my favorite ones, and we can go ahead and take a look at the intake form. So I'll give you like 2 minutes. Looks like we did have an update as of May 25th. If you guys are looking for any updates that have happened to open to close, you're going to go over to your person icon in the top right-hand corner, and you'll go down to change log. Then here you'll see the change log and what updates we've had done recently to the system. So here, this is an example of one that's been done: email editor and image upload option. there was an issue with the email editor where the option to upload or insert an image is no longer available. The ability to upload an email signature and add images when sending an email or editing email templates. This has been fixed. Users can now upload or insert images. Perfect. I know exactly where that's referring to too. When we're going to our email templates, hammer icon into templates. Looks like this one was called image test. This one is one that was being tested on here. And whenever we go to insert an image, so if we click on our little image icon, and we say upload, they were having issues here, but now it has been fixed. You can insert an image. Awesome. All right. Well, I don't see. Oh, wonderful. Cool. Welcome in, Jordan. All right. Brand new to OTC, wondering about the task templates, if there's an overall listing or purchase task template, as it currently looks like there isn't. It kind of depends on when you signed up for your open to close account. But if you did sign up after, I think it was November of last year, you should have gotten access to our pre-built account, which should have a list of task templates that are already built into the system. So we'll head over down to our three-line icon, head down into our hammer icon and get into templates. Here we'll go down to task templates. It's the third option. It might be the second option for you, depending on which plan you signed up for. And then here we can click on sort templates. And then if we're looking for listing ones, I'm just going to type in listing. Here's listing. I'm going to bring that to the top. And then purchase, I mean, we have buyer side and we have seller side, I believe. So I'll just type in buyer. Here's our main buyer under contract ones. And I know we have a main seller under contract ones. Let me type in main. There we go. Cool. So within your system, and I was just using the tool, I was using Control F or Command F if you're on a Mac. That allows me to search the page really quickly. We clicked on sort templates, which shows us a list of all the task templates we currently have. Instead of me having to, scroll to the bottom and click through the pages, I can click on sort templates and then I can move those task templates to the top. So already pre-built into your account, you should get access to listing tasks, main under contract, and seller main under contract. So this would be like overall listing tasks, buyer, and then seller. Now, one thing that you'll learn about open to close as you start to get into it and you start to go around and you start to play with things and enter in things is you'll notice that we have our processes broken down into other task templates as well. So for example, when you're saying overall list, right? This is probably the list that's specifically all the things that you would do for listings. But sometimes there are things that can happen elsewise, right? There are other things that could happen with that listing or that purchase agreement, right? If we're talking about buyer under contract, this one is just the standard, only the tasks that are pertaining to what you would do for the buyer, right? Specifically, if there was no other things on that particular contract and you're just handling things for the buyer, this would be what that task template was. Now, if we scroll down, you're going to take notice of the fact that we have buyer inspection tasks separate, finance tasks separate, home protection tasks separate, and HOA tasks separate. The reason that we have those separate is because we want you to rely on the conditional logic to be able to bring those on or remove them. You're not going to have inspection tasks for every single property. And some properties are cash deals. So you might not need those financing tasks every single time. And same thing with HOA, right? If the property is not it does not exist in an HOA, then you wouldn't be handling those HOA tasks. So the way that we've built it out, the way that your account should be built out, as long as you still have that pre-built account into your account, is that instead you're going to work off of conditional logic. The conditional logic works in our intake forms. Intake forms are how you're going to be populating those properties within open to close. When you say, yes, there's an HOA, yes, there's an inspection, yes, there's a home protection plan included on this particular contract, that's when it's going to populate those task templates. But if it does not have those things, yeah, there's an inspection, no, there's no HOA, and no, we're not doing home warranty for this particular property or home insurance for this property, then you won't have to worry about those other additional processes coming onto the property. It doesn't just work with your task templates. If you say, yes, there's an HOA, your task templates will come on, the fields that you need for HOA will come on, and the documents that you need, the document placeholders that you need will come onto that property. So that's kind of the idea behind it. if you're ever going through and you're editing and you're like, okay, well, how do I, what's like the best way for me to go through and edit this? What I usually suggest is start with whatever side you're doing the most for. If right now you've got a lot of listings, go through, organize your listings and go through and kind of segment them and review the information from there, update each one of those task templates and kind of think of like, okay, well, there's actually an additional process because I don't think we have too many things for listing. If I click on here, I don't think we've got things for like photography or anything like that. Yeah. I don't think we have anything for those kind of like, are we doing videography? Are we doing photography? Are we doing staging? That kind of stuff. I don't think we have task templates necessarily for that. But you can definitely create them. And it's okay if the task template is like 2 or 3 tasks long. My buyer's HOA task template is literally 2 tasks, but it's 2 tasks that I don't have to think about. If they're on the property, I have to complete them. If they're not, then I don't have to worry about it. Looks like we've got a follow up. So I get more information put into my intake form for a certain property. That conditional logic will automatically generate those tasks for that specific property. Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly correct. So as long as they're answering those questions correctly, whoever it is, whether that's your internal TCs or whether that's your internal TCs or whether that's your agents, whoever's filling out that intake form, how they fill it out is going to populate that property. So if I go ahead and open up an intake form, and if you haven't gotten into your intake form yet, there's going to be one thing that I'm going to suggest right now. So getting to your intake form from your dashboard, I like to use the 3-line icon. It just makes it easier for me to go into the back end, go into the front end. So 3-line icon, get down to your hammer icon, get into your templates. You're going to go down to intake form templates. Go ahead and choose any one of the ones that we've already built out: buyer, new listing, residential. I'm going to go ahead and grab buyer in this example. Once I grab that buyer one, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go to layout. It's going to be underneath our settings. When we click on layout, I'm going to leave this here for just a moment. What I want you to do is I want you to reorder your fields into this specific layout as well. So it looks like I have test fields at the top. You can ignore those. You probably don't have test fields at the top, but put your address to the top. All you're going to do is click on these 3 or 6 dots and you'll be able to drag them to the very top. Next, I want you to put property questions below it, then contract questions, and then critical details. Everything below that, you can leave it as is. But the reason that I want these 3 at the very top is because this is going to affect the order in which your intake form is going to populate. And the way that we want it to populate is we want you to put in that address, get that done. And then the next thing we want you to do is say, what are we handling? What's going on with that property? What does the property have? And then what is on that contract? What is the contract dealing with? So as long as we get those 2 at the top in this order: address, property questions, contract questions. You could even do contract questions first if you want. Either one's fine. And then we pop our critical details just below that. You're going to set yourself up for a lot of success. It's going to be easier to fill out that intake form. So I'll go ahead and sit on this screen for just a moment longer. That way you see the order that I have it set up. Now, in the future, you can always go in and reorder other things that you want to reorder, right? We have a lot of people who end up coming back here and they end up reordering, HOA details, appraisal details, inspection details, because they want it to match as closely to the way that their contracts populate as possible. So if on your contracts, oh, well, Hannah, the inspection information's like first. Like that's the first thing I see. Like after I know what I'm doing with that contract and I say yes to all the things, when I'm looking at the contract inspection, that's the first thing that I look at. And then my appraisals is the next thing. And then when the house was built is the next thing. And then, HOA details is down below our home protection plans, right? So if we put it in this order, when I click on secure form, it's going to open up a sample version of that intake form that I can edit. I'm going to go ahead and wait just a second, see if you need to get a screenshot of this page. And again, if you can't see the property questions like here in this top list, you might have to scroll to the bottom. I have a lot of fields in my account right now that are in here. You might not have this many, but you might want to scroll down and drag those up. But if we're looking good here, I'm going to go ahead and click on secure form. That's going to open up a sample version of my intake form. Looks like this one's already kind of half filled out. I'm going to go ahead and select cancel form. Again, when we want to fill out an intake form, we want it to look like this if we're an internal user, right? So internal users, you're selecting the team So here I'm going to go ahead and say it's this team, and then you're selecting the team user required. So I'll go ahead and select myself. I can select the agent if I'd like to. Again, this is internal. If the agent was filling out, then the agent doesn't have to select who they're assigned to. It's automatically assigned to them. Scrolling down here, we'll pop in the address. So just go ahead and grab West Taylor Road. Looks like, again, this was the test one. So we'll go ahead and leave that there. We're going to ignore that. Here's our address, our property questions, and our contract questions. Something else that you might take notice of when you're looking at this is that, oh, hold on, the way that your questions look and the way that my questions look is different. I've got these drop downs, but you have like radio buttons. If you're interested in learning how to convert your drop down to radio buttons, whether it's the ones where they're stacked or they're side by side, let me know. We can go take a look at where to update that. But here, if I say, yes, there's an HOA, yes, this house was built prior to 1978, yes, there's an alarm, I'm going to go ahead and say no for this one because I'm not sure what that question is. Scrolling down, I'm going to pop in today's date as the intake date. 5th, cool. There's not an alternate EDM. Yeah, there's a home protection. Yeah, there's a referral. No, the seller is not paying closing costs. Yes, there'll be an inspection. So if you notice, the moment I said yes, there'll be an inspection, a couple more questions popped up. Here, what kind of inspections are we doing then? If I select these ones, this is just going to let me be able to know, okay, these are the different inspections that we're handling. So when I'm looking at my fields, I know that these are the inspections that I need to order. So here we'll go ahead and say, yes, there's a loan. Will there be an appraisal? Yes. So I've answered yes to everything. Well, as I've answered yes to everything, if I scroll down, we're going to start to get into some of those details. So here, once again, it looks like we've got types of inspections twice. That makes sense. I have this one as a test, but if I needed to, again, I'm going to select, general, there's a pool and there's a roof that needs an inspection. But here's that inspection period due days. Depending on where you're at, on what state you're in and what county you're in, your contracts might say due days, it might say due date. This is customizable. You can have it say the due date field if you'd like. You can also have it say the due days field. In California, we have days, so I'm just going to pop in 17 because that's usually what they do. Scrolling down here, appraisal conditions. Once again, I can say, yes, there are appraisal conditions or no, and then I can pop in that date or that number. Scrolling down here, once again, will there be I said yes, the house was built prior to 1978 here. And so that question came up to ask me, okay, well, is there an inspection required for this? If I change that question, actually, no, they're not built prior to 1978. It was built 1980. If I scroll down now, what I want you to take notice is that whole entire section that asked me about the inspection, it's gone. So that's the idea behind using that conditional logic. If you say, yes, you're handling it, it'll show up. If you say, no, you're not, it will remove it. So once again, home protection details. Let's say, actually, no, there is no home protection on this particular property. We can go ahead and say no. And if we scroll down, ta-da, appraisal details now just jump straight into HOA details because I said there was an HOA and it removed that particular field section that was asking about the home warranty, or I'm sorry, the home insurance information. So that's the idea, right? While you're going through and you're filling out your intake form, you might find yourself going, I need more fields, or I need to add on more things. If you find yourself doing that, then that's when you know, okay, cool. Well, I'll need to come in here and I'll need to edit this intake form. Either if you're looking for questions, that's part of your process that you don't see in here. What I usually suggest is writing them down and creating a little mind map for yourself, a little paper sheet mind map that says, okay, well, I have this one question. And the question is, in some cases, this isn't one of the ones that we have built out right now on your system. Will there be a septic inspection? Maybe it's separate. Maybe you do a general inspection, septic inspection, a well inspection. And those three things are separate. So you need to know yes, no, no, or yes, yes, yes. So you could have a question like, is there a septic on site? That's your first question. You need to know whether or not there's a septic on site, right? So I'd write down, is there a septic on site? And then I would go ahead and create my branches. If it's a no, is that where it ends? Wonderful. It ends there. It doesn't go anything further. If you say, yes, there is a septic on site, what happens next? If you need to fill out more fields, right? You're requiring your agent, hey, agent, I need you to tell me, okay, when is it due? Here, the inspection here. So when is it due? Again, based off of a due date or due days field, have them ask that. And then if you need to ask any other information, maybe you need a text area for them to say where it is, or just share information. You can also add in those other details as well. So for example, in this case, I have this multiple choice question here that goes through and lists the other things that we'll be doing as well. You might have it where it's a text area that they need to type in something, right? And then after they answer those questions, what happens after that? Well, if you say that there's a septic and you've said yes, and the agents popped in their days field and they shared any other information with you on this particular intake form, what's the next step? If you need a task template, then you're going to write that out. Okay, well, what's going on with those tasks? If it's a septic inspection, I need to make sure that I have scheduled it. So I have to reach out and I have to find someone, I have to schedule it. I want to track that date, make sure that the date that they're truly going to go and do that is in my system. That way I can say, okay, we've scheduled it for, we're playing pretend, June 10th. It's in 5 days. Scheduled it for June 10th. From there, what else would you need? Do you need documents? So you write down, okay, I need a document, right? Because I need to track it on my property. I need a placeholder. So I'm going to write down, I need a document as well. And the document can be just as simple as inspection addendum, or I'm sorry, septic inspection addendum, or whatever it is, however you guys title that document. And so now that you have this map, then you'll have to figure out, okay, well, how do I implement this into open to close? And I'm going to kind of go over the steps on how to do that from here. So the first things first, right? You've written it out. You can see at the very beginning part, when we're asking for data, you're going to need questions. So you don't have that question just yet. Will there be a septic inspection on site? So how would we add that in there? We're going to go down to our hammer icon and get into our field editor. Depending on how you like to organize things, you might follow a different route, but I usually like to go to my field groups, head down to my intake questions, and add in that question in here. So either I'm adding it to the property questions or contract questions. Technically, because this is kind of like specific to the property, I'd probably say add it to my property questions. And here, add in, is there septic on site? I'm going to go ahead and grab the name of that field label and pop it into my merge field and just copying and pasting it into here. If you're ever looking to do that on your keyboard, it's Control C and then Control V, or if you're on a Mac, it's Command C and then Command V. Now we'll go ahead and go down to the bottom. Our field type is going to be a choice, and we're just going to say add. We don't have to worry about multiple choice or any of that. Here we're going to say no. And then we're going to say yes. You could add in other questions if you want to. That's one strategy that Kelly shared with us, is that sometimes you'll need to add more. Maybe they don't know, right? But they're unsure. They're like, there could be. When I looked at the property, I thought there was, but I'm not sure. You can add in unsure as another option as well. And maybe you want to reorder it. Yes, unsure, and no. So if you're not sure, you can add those in there. Once you've added that in, we're going to say, what do we want to see in the agent portal? What do we want to be available on that intake form? So here I'm going to go ahead and select our purple stars, making this viewable on that intake form. All that does is make it so that people can see it. Once we have that on there, we're going to go ahead and go on to our opposite side where we've got our, editing that specific field and the logic for that field. We're just going to update that view of it to display radio options. And then we can also say that we want to stack them. So remember what I said, you're either going to have your options side by side, or they're going to be stacked. Yes and no, up and from top to bottom, or side to side. So I'll go ahead and say stacked. We'll scroll to the bottom, say, I understand, and update. Now that field is here up at the top. We're going to want to make sure that we select that purple star here to show it in the portal. Again, this is just making it so that it actually shows up on that intake form. You have to make sure that this shows up. And now we have that question in here. Okay, so now we have a question in here. If they answer yes, what's the next step? If they answer no, if it stops, that's fine. If it's unsure, right? Maybe there's another process that you guys follow. You reach out to the agent and you go, hey, you answered unsure on these 3 things. You said you were unsure if there was a septic on site, unsure if there was an HOA, and you were unsure about the if there was an alarm. I need you to send me back information and let me know what is going on with those, right? You could have a smart block built out for each one of those processes. That way, when you send out that email, you really just have to review it instead of deleting things that you don't need. If you have a smart block for it, it'll make it easier. So here we've added in that question, but we still need other fields, right? If you need the due date for it, right? If there's a period of time that you need to schedule that septic inspection, or there's a specific due date that you want to track to say when that's due, that way you can push it to calendars so that the buyer knows and the seller knows, or so that the buyer's agent knows when that septic inspection is going to occur. You're going to want to go back to your field groups and go to your transaction details. I usually like to put it underneath my transaction details versus like my listing details, just because that's usually where I'll put these groups of fields. But if we scroll down in here, you can see we've got inspection details, HOA details, lead-based paint. We've got each one of those field sections. If you know that your fields are going to be more than just like 2 fields, you might want to go ahead and create a specific field section for that area, right? So 2 fields would be there's a due date and a days field. This is just the 2 fields. Maybe we want to add that to our inspection details and leave it at that. But if we know that we're going to need like an area where our agent is going to enter in information, or we're going to need multiple fields, this is when I would probably suggest adding in a section. And we'll call this one septic on site. And call it septic if you want to, whatever makes the most sense to you. We'll go ahead and say add section, and it's going to add it to the top. And now we're going to add in those fields. So we need to add in our due date, septic due date. Oh, actually, I'm going to use this septic inspection due date. Pop that into my merge field, and this is going to be a date field. And then I'm going to say add field. Oh, looks like I already have a field with that similar language with it. Is it on this screen? It is. Cool. It's actually underneath there. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab that field, and I'm going to select move. So I'm selecting the field. I'm going to select move. I'm going to pop that back into my septic on site. Perfect. Now it's up there. Again, if you guys have it in your area where there's a days field with it as well, right? So septic inspection and it's based off of days, you can also add in that days field. So I'm just going to change that from due date to due days. I'm going to create that field, merge field. And then here for our field type, we're going to say number. That way we can add in a number. And again, this is if like on your guys' contracts, it says, well, the septic inspection is due in 14 days, 14 business days after contract acceptance. Okay. If your contracts say that, then you're going to need that days field. And the reason you're going to need the days field is so that you can use our date templates to calculate that date. You can say, well, the septic inspection is 14 business days after contract acceptance. But sometimes maybe if that date changes, they write in 21, they write in 7, they write in 3. Then here with that days field, that's going to make it so that you can populate a different number in there. Instead of it being the standard 14, you can put in whatever number you need to, and then it'll schedule that particular septic inspection due date. Another field that I would probably add in here just for good measure is septic inspection status. This status field is going to be super helpful. Once again, we're going to say it's a choice field. We'll go ahead and say add field. And here I like to do not scheduled, scheduled. If you need to pop in a rescheduled, whatever other fields you might need to pop in for this septic inspection. You could even say waived if you wanted to. If at some point after the fact it is waived, so you know that it's on there, but we're not doing anything for it. Maybe you received another addendum, they accepted as is, or they don't, it's not something you need to worry about. You can change that to waived. But the reason that I like having a septic inspection status is because when you guys are looking at growth within open to close and you're looking at ways to make the system work for you, having these statuses can truly help out with populating more smart blocks in case you run into a scenario where, okay, yeah, well, it needs to be rescheduled. So if you said, the inspection status is set to rescheduled, then maybe a specific smart block comes onto that email and it notifies whoever, buyer's agent, buyer, hey, this needs to get rescheduled. It was canceled due to weather or whatever reason it was canceled for. We need to reschedule this particular inspection. Or you could say it was scheduled, or you could even have, and this is one that I always forget, completed. You could even put completed, no issues, completed, needs rescheduling, whatever that makes sense to you guys. But we would want to make sure to add in each one of those options. That way, if you say it's been completed, maybe it was completed before, maybe there was a pre-inspection before, and that sufficed for what you guys needed to do for it. You could mark it as completed. And then all of the smart blocks or all of the information that you're sharing with your team after that is just, hey, this has already been completed. See the addendum attached, right? So that's the idea behind using these statuses is to assist you in making sure that the process is on track and you've completed what you needed to complete. And when it comes to growing in your system, you have that already there for your smart blocks. As well as if you decide to move up to the scale plan and you start to use property triggers instead of using, task triggers, you start looking at property triggers for it. Once I feel good about the fields here, I'm going to go ahead and click on groups, select sort groups, and I'm just going to put this down here underneath my HOA. So I'm just clicking on septic on site, and I'm dragging it down below my HOA. I could put it wherever I want. I can reorder any of these fields in whatever order makes the most sense to me. These fields is going to, the order in which these fields are in is going to affect your properties as well as your intake forms, right? So if you already have your fields ordered in the order that you need them, when you go to look at that intake form, you're probably going to have very little to do other than to move the address up and then those questions, those property questions and contract questions to the very top, right? Other than that, though, you should be good across the board as long as you've ordered things here in the order that they need to be in. But here we've gone ahead and moved that down to the bottom. So we have our fields now. Let's go ahead and exit out of our field editor. We're going to go down to our hammer icon. And then usually what I suggest is get your task templates in, right? So create that task template. So I'm going to go to task template and I'm just going to say create new. And I'm just going to call this septic on site tasks and say submit. I'm not going to add anything to it right now. I'm just going to create the template. So I can go ahead and go back to our task templates. You'll see here at the top, if I select edit, that's me adding in those task templates. I can also import into this particular task template if it's already created. So if I wanted to use my import tool, let's say I've already got those built out and I just want to import them in, I can go down to my import tool. Here I can choose my import type. I'll go ahead and say task templates. And here I can say import tasks to an existing task template. I can select that. And then when I go to upload it and I map these fields out, it's going to ask me which task template are we trying to import these tasks to? And you can just say your septic on-site task template. So that's the way that we can use it. Again, keep in mind that when we're importing, there's a lot of really wonderful fields here. So if you guys needed to have your dates already scheduled, that's available. If you guys needed to tag it or add in roles, right? Who's completing this particular task, you can have that set up in there. We just want to make sure that the spelling matches exactly what's in your system. So make sure that if it's admin with a capital A, that it's admin with a capital A on that spreadsheet, right? To make sure that those things map correctly. It's very particular about that. Once we know I've got our task templates in there, if we need to add in a document template, we can do that too. So if this is a case where we need specific septic documents, I added in an extra T. We can go ahead and say septic documents. Again, for our folders, I'm going to go ahead and say septic docs and add that on there. Once I add that on there, I'm going to click on the plus file to create that placeholder. So this is just the folder. If I click on plus file and we'll say septic addendum, say addenda, add that in there. This creates the placeholder for it. Once we have that placeholder created, you can then add on that file role if you'd like to. And I think I have one for septic. Cool, I do. I've got one for acceptance letter, compliance letter, and then septic inspection report. I'm going to go ahead and select that one. Now, I have a rule set up in my system to rename my placeholders when I add something to it. So that's why you saw that name update to septic inspection report. If I needed the compliance letter, I'm just going to go ahead and add 2, and then I'm going to add 3. Once I've added those on there, I can go ahead and click on that drop down again. Oop, sorry. Click on that drop down again, search for septic, grab compliance letter, and that's going to update the verbiage for that one. Grab septic, and then grab the acceptance letter. And here now you see I've got them expanded. Let me go ahead and click on collapse. Here now you see we've got those placeholders. So now we have the septic documents built out too. We've got the placeholders. These are the 3 documents that we need when we do a septic inspection. Once we've made sure our task templates are in here, our document templates in here, we're going to go down to our intake form. When we're in our intake form, we're going to go ahead and edit whatever intake form we want to edit. So let's say it's the buyer side. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over to our intake questions, and we're going to make sure that new field is selected. So here's that septic on site. We want to say, yes, we want to bring it on to that particular intake form. This is going to be the agent side. When we've selected a green button on the agent field where it says agent field, this is going to be on the left-hand side. We're going to want to make sure we select the green button on the internal side as well. So we've selected it on both sides. This says ask it on the intake form. This says bring that answer to the property. We can also make it required on that intake form. So the agent has to put in something when they see that question. They either have to say yes, unsure, or no. They have to add in a value. Okay. If we want to require it of that agent. If we're okay with them skipping it over, maybe it's not something that they would necessarily need to fill out. We can also make it required on the internal side. So here we can say, well, the question's going to be there, but if the agent doesn't know and they skip over it, totally fine. Internally, when that question comes in, if it has not gotten an answer, internally our TCs or our internal user, whoever's reviewing that intake form when it's submitted, they'll be the ones who has to answer it, have to say yes, no, whatever they need to do. Okay. I'll go ahead and say that yes, on the agent side in this example, typically you're going to be asking your agents this. Now, once we have this question, is there septic on site? And they say yes. Again, this is why your map is going to be so helpful. If you have that paper map that you're looking at, well, if they say no, thread ends, right? We don't have to do anything else. But if they say yes, what do I need to know next? If you need to ask that agent more questions, you need to ask the due days field for it. You need to ask the status for it. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to build out our form conditions. Oh, we've got a question. Hold on, I'll pause. When a listing property in withhold status, is the contract date? Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding your question. When listing a property in withhold status, is the contract date the date they signed the listing paperwork? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Yeah, so it kind of depends again on what form you're filling out, because when you fill out that new listing agreement, if you have access to this particular intake form, when we go to fill that one out, I'm just going to go ahead and select listing in this. There's usually like a listing date. Where are you? Listing agreement start date. If there's a contract date and it's required, I want you to think of that as like the date that you signed it with the buyer versus the listing. I don't even have like that particular field on there. So if you're looking at the seller side, that would be if you've already gone under contract. So if you've gone under contract, I would say yes. Kelly, what do you think? If it's withhold status, do you think that the contract date would be the same date that they signed the listing papers, or is that too soon to fill out the intake for the seller's intake form?
When I did withhold status, it was usually we already had like a contract and like a contract date acceptance or a listing agreement date, and the withhold status, I would actually have a date for the actual when it went under withhold.
Okay, so like you'd have a separate field that would say withhold due date or withhold date, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would.
So Jordan, if that helps, it sounds like you're going to need to add in another date. You can add it in wherever it makes the most sense for you. You can add it underneath the critical details if you'd like, or if you've got a specific area underneath your listing details, maybe under listing information, you want to add that in there. And what I would do is if the contract status is equal to withhold status, then that field comes on. But if it doesn't have that, then you don't need it to come on. And that's what we're just about to look at. So this is a perfect example. I've said I want this particular field to come on here. In your case, it would be when that contract status is selected. What you'll need to do next is go to your form conditions and you'll need to add a condition. Form conditions are things that will populate more fields on that property while it's being filled out by the agent. So filling it out, adding more fields to that intake form. Sorry, I said property intake form. So here in your case, I would say property fields. I would go to choose field and I'd say contract status. I actually think I have it as file status in my account. Cool. File status. It might be file status in your account as well. I would say if it's equal to, and then here I would look, and I don't think I have a withhold. Okay, I have withdrawn. I would look for that withhold status. Hopefully you've already added that in there. If you haven't, you're going to want to go to your fields and add in that choice option. So here you'd select the one. I'm just going to go ahead and select a random one. We'll go ahead and say contingent. And you'd say add. We'll go ahead and close out of here. Now you'll have that file status equal to, it should say withhold for you in your case. And then you'll select edit actions. And here where it says dynamically add fields, you're going to look for that date, that withhold date that they would enter in. And you'd select and you'd add that in. So I'm going to, again, pretend that the possession date is that withhold date, and I'm going to say add, and I can make it required. So from beginning to end, make sure that you have that contract status in there underneath your contract or your field file statuses, contract statuses. You're going to make sure that you have that date in there, date underneath your listing details if you'd like to, if it's something that specifically happens with listings, or you can put it under your critical details if it happens with, any kind of property. And then you're going to come into your intake form and you're going to create that form condition here. And you're going to edit and you're going to add in that action here so that it adds in that field. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and delete this because I don't need it. And then I'll go ahead and add on that other condition that I talked about. So again, if we say that the septic on site is equal to yes, we need to know the due date and we need to know the status of that particular inspection. So here we can go to choose conditional type. We're going to say property fields. Again, we're going to look for that septic question. So I just typed in septic. Is there septic on site? If it's equal to yes, add that in there. It's going to add it to the top. We'll select edit actions. And then here we're going to look for that septic due days and add. And then we're going to look for that septic and status and say add. We can make these required. We can leave them as is if we want to though, but that's how we've added it in so that when that intake form, someone's answered a question on the intake form, it populates more of those questions. That's what your form conditions are. Now, after they say yes, you're going to go, well, okay, well, I want those task templates and document templates to come on if I've said yes. What's the next step? In your case, Jordan, if you have it that when it's under withhold status, you have a specific task template that you follow when it's withhold until you've met that date, if that's something that you do, or you just need reminder tasks. I'm not sure. I haven't worked with that kind of contract before. Kelly, would there be tasks for something like that?
Sometimes it depends on if you want to or not. A lot of times the agent might handle it too, so you don't have to, but
Kind of depends.
Potentially do it for them. Yeah.
Cool. So if you have it, and this is something you need to build out, you're going to go to your form triggers. Form triggers are going to be what happens after that intake form has been submitted. So what happens when the agent says submit and they send the information to you? What do we want to happen next? And this is when we're going to be looking at, okay, adding in a trigger that happens when the intake form is submitted. I want to add a field section. That's usually what I like to start with. The field section that we want to add is our septic inspection or septic details or septic on site. Once we've added that on there, we'll go ahead and click on trigger options, turn on this trigger, and then we're going to add our condition. Like I said, our conditions is what powers the system. So you're going to use the same condition that you used for your form conditions. You're going to go to conditional type, and you're going to say property field. And then you're going to look for that septic on site. You're going to say equal to yes. So again, just like how we did it for our form conditions, we want that same exact logic for our form triggers. That way, when they say yes, that's when we get this particular thing to populate. So I'll go ahead and say yes and say add. Now that that's on there, I usually like to grab the trigger assets. Trigger assets are just what is included in this trigger. And I like to add that in there. That way, if I ever go to sort triggers, I can see what this trigger does. Here you can see that. Now, we have two different types of triggers, or we have a couple different types of triggers, but we have two different times that triggers have actions to them. When the intake form is submitted, it's called agent submitted, and when it's approved internally. When it comes to our task templates and our document templates, the way that I like to build it out is I like to say those will happen after they're approved. The reason I like to do this is because I want to give my TCs the opportunity to double check to make sure that there truly is a septic on site. There's nothing more irritating, I'll say, than getting a contract that has had yes, 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 or no, no, no on it. And then you find out later that, let's say your TC reviews the contract and they go, wait a second, there is a septic on site. I need to change this answer because when the intake form gets approved, when I've approved that property and I've said, yes, I'm going to start working on it, I need those task templates on it. Or you go, there is no HOA. We don't need the task template. So I need to change that from a yes to a no, right? So I like to say upon approved internally. Here for our trigger function, we'll say add or remove a template and we'll say add. Here, this is when I'm choosing the septic task templates and document templates. So I'm just typing in septic and I'm selecting it, type in septic again and add on those documents. So now our task template and our document template are added to this trigger. We'll go ahead and say close. I like to click on trigger options to expand the triggers and then turn on that trigger. Here, we're going to add on that same condition, property field, septic, septic on site. If it's equal to yes, then we want this particular task template and document template to come on. I'll say add. Again, like I said, I like to grab the naming conventions here. I'm just going to copy them and say add and then paste. We can remove this plus sign if we'd like to. I think it goes away automatically though. Go ahead and say add. I'm going to go ahead and say refresh triggers just to remove that plus sign there. We'll click on sort triggers. And here we see that this pink one is up here at the top with the green ones. The way that you order your triggers is really important. The way that the system likes to fire it off is from top to bottom. So technically, this internally approved trigger right here is a trigger that's not going to be fired off until it's actually been approved. So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to drag it down to the bottom. And it just has to be below the bottom green one so that all of these green ones fire off first. So I usually do, and I'm going to go ahead and reorder them a little bit. I usually do bring that down here, any fields I want to add first, then field sections, those are FS, and then any templates that I need to add the bottom. And then if I scroll down, I've got all of my templates grouped here, and then I have my date template at the very bottom of that approved internally. You could also have your date template come on when you are submitting that intake form. I usually like my date template to come on when it's been approved. That way, if the TC needs to add in any days fields, they can. Because again, we don't have to require our agent to add in those days fields. You can just require your agent to say yes or no, are we handling this condition? Your intake form can be as simple as give me the address and say whether or not we're handling these processes and then submit it to me. And then your TC can be the one that makes sure to add in, well, if it's they said yes to inspection, cool, I'm going to make sure to put in my inspection due days. They said, yes, there's an HOA. I'm going to add in my HOA due days. They said, yes, we're doing an appraisal. What's the appraisal due days? Oh, it's a cash deal or it's a finance deal. I need to add in my loan approval days, or my loan application days, whatever that looks like. You can have that all done internally as well. This is just one way that we can do it. There's tons of ways that you can handle it with an open and close. After that point, you're done. That's it. You've added in the fields that you need to add in for that process. You've gone over and you've made sure that you've got your document templates, your task templates in there ready for you to use. You've headed to your intake form and you've selected your fields to make sure to ask those questions on that particular intake form. You've added in your form conditions to be able to make it that, when that question gets answered, yes, then there's additional questions that we need to ask the agent. And you've built out those form triggers to bring on those field sections and the templates, the task template and the document template. What's the next step? Test it. Go to your secure form, go to choose team, choose your team, choose yourself or choose whoever team member, pop in an address, and then locate that question. So here we'll scroll down. Is there septic on site? If I say yes, I want to be able to scroll down and see information for septic. Ooh, let me make sure I've actually said yes to it. Oh, I didn't select that field section, did I? Because I realized I just created it new. Remember how I said if you don't select the purple stars, they don't show up? See how this purple star is not showed up? It's not going to show up in that intake form. Let me select that. And let me select purple stars for all of my days fields. So again, this is me using the system so much that I know what I need to do to update. But if you ever find it, you're like, okay, I followed all of Hannah's steps and the fields, they're not here. Go double check to make sure that you have your field selected with those purple stars here. Otherwise, like I said, they're not going to show up like they just did right now. Let's go ahead and get out of our field editor. I'll go ahead and create a new intake form from here. We'll do that buyer side. I'm going to select my team again and my community agent. And we'll go ahead and add our address. Now let's go try this. I'll go ahead and say, yes, there's a septic on site. And if we scroll down, oh, interesting. Well, that's a little worrisome. Huh. Now I'm going to have to check this out. Is there septic on site? Is this the right question? Yeah, that's the right question. Huh. Kelly, do you know if I missed a step?
No, I'm as dumbfounded as you are.
We're both like, huh? What's happening right now? Yeah, is there septic on site? I just want to make sure that I didn't ask a different question because I know that we have that sometimes. There is other fields. Hold on. This is my buyer's residential. We've got our intake questions here. We've got our form conditions built out right here. This looks good. Let me look at my condition action map. Nope, that looks good too. Secure form. Let's try that again. If I can't get it to work, then I'm going to need to submit a ticket. Huh? Did it appear above? Ah, it did appear above because the layout got changed. Interesting. Okay, maybe I do need to submit a ticket because the layout didn't update. I moved it down to the bottom. Let's try that again. Do we need to alter the layout every single time that a new field section gets added on there? Even if I moved the field section down to the bottom? Let's try this again. Where are you? Oh, this is all out of order now. Oh no, I put it out of order. Okay, I'm gonna have to reorder these. I think it refreshed the order of the fields. Let me go ahead and say, yes, there's an septic inspection. Just make sure that those fields show. Okay, they did. So it's out. So it looks like when I updated my fields, I need to update my layout again. So let me just go ahead and click on layout again and refresh. Let me just refresh the screen, go down to layout, address, critical details, property details. Yep, my questions are down here at the bottom. Interesting. Questions. There we go. I figure I'm just going to save myself the effort and type in questions. That way I can highlight them really quickly. That's really interesting. Okay, that's something I'm going to need to keep in mind. When you add in a new field section, it reorders the fields. So let's go back over to secure form. Now that I've reordered my fields again, this is the layout that we need. If you guys notice, I got really confused because the layout was updated. It was changed. The layout that we want is address, property questions, contract questions, then everything else can populate below. But if we don't do that, if you notice, the septic inspection questions were at the top. And that's why I kept thinking that they were missing. They weren't actually missing. They were just populating in a different order than I expected. Here we go. Contract address, address. Looks good. Questions. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, there's a septic inspection on, or there's a septic on site. I'm just going to scroll up. No other questions up here. So we'll scroll down. Here's those questions. There we go. And so now we see those questions on here. Woo. All right, cool. Okay, I'm going to have to make a note of that. We are at time. So I'll go ahead and end our call for now. But I'm glad that you guys got to see me doing some troubleshooting there. If you notice, don't panic. Just start looking around at the places where you might think it might be the issue. You can also send us a Loom video if you run into that issue as well. That's probably what I would do. Or just make sure you include which intake form you were editing. Hey, I'm editing this intake form. I just added on a new field section. I can't see it. It's not showing up. What's going on? It might be something as simple as we need to update the layout, or like I said, maybe the fields haven't been selected. So we need to go in and we need to make sure that they've been selected in your field editor to show up in your portal. I'm going to go ahead and wait just a second because I did talk a lot about this. Were there any other questions that we wanted to review today? Cool. Alrighty, guys. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you guys next week. I'm going to go ahead and go over just my end of call resources that I usually do. So again, if you guys are looking for support and you need to reach out to us, absolutely feel free to chat with us. If you send us a Loom video, screenshots, as much information as you can, this is where I'm seeing the issue with this particular field, intake form, whatever that looks like. Definitely make sure you include all of those details in your first message. It makes it so much faster for us to go in there, figure out what your situation is, and help you quicker and get you to your solution a lot faster. If you have something else that you want to reach out to us about, you can also send us an email at help@opentoclose as well. If you're looking for more webinars like today's webinar, you're going to head to our website, go to our Learn tab, and go to Webinars. Here you're going to see all the webinars that we currently have. I definitely suggest people come in here and take a look at that importing webinar if you guys want to learn a little bit more about that new tool. Otherwise, fields, tasks, intake forms, these might be good for any new trialers with Open to Close. It just goes over the basics. They're very short. They're meant to be paired with our onboarding guide. If you're looking for our onboarding guide, you can either go in your app to the person icon to Support Center, or from our website, you can go to Learn and go to Help Guides. It's going to open up the same place. You go to Onboarding Series, and then here you're going to see our onboarding series here. These articles are meant to be pretty quick reads. I think the longest one is probably intake forms. I think it is. The intake forms is like maybe a 30-minute read, because I've got some really, really long videos that go over the stuff that I went over today. So if I move too fast for you and you're like, I do want to make those updates, how do I do that? Head over and take a look at that guide. It goes over all of the steps that I just covered today as well. If you're looking for onboarding options, you're going to go to our onboarding page. Here you can schedule with us to learn a little bit more about what we have as far as for onboarding, to see what makes the most sense for you. Sometimes it's doing it with you, right? Building out that intake for building out your account with you. Sometimes the hourly is what makes sense, or sometimes our free resources make sense as well. Like I said, I hope I see you guys on next Wednesday workshop. If not, have a wonderful rest of your day and happy June. Hope everyone is staying cool. We're hitting it. I'm getting hit by a heat wave right now. I think it's like 102 right now. Oh, it's 93 degrees. It's going to get 102 today. So hopefully you guys stay hydrated, stay inside, make sure you use sunscreen, and I will see you guys next week.